Assalamu alaikum, dear ladies and gentlemen. This is my first podcast in English. Welcome to Mr. Dandastic. Today I have a very, very special and very colorful guest, a Canadian originally from Pakistan, Mr. Farooq. Welcome to this podcast. Thank you so much for accepting this offer. Ustad al-Fadil. Ustad Farooq is my friend before COVID. Let's say we met with him. And he has lots of experience in humanitarian work, special education. And we'll talk all about this, of course. Ustad Farooq, welcome again. Thank you for coming. Would like to know, and I would like to know, a good Pakistani guy goes to Canada. What's happening after?
Thank you very much, Tarik, for being here, for inviting me here.
Thanks.
It's my pleasure to be here. And obviously you and I, we go back a long way, but, we became very close during the time of COVID.
Yes.
So it's my pleasure to be here.
Thanks so much.
My story goes back a fairly long time. I was born in Pakistan. My parents were settled in Canada. And for the first 9 years of my life, I was raised by my grandparents in Pakistan. So those were my kind of initial roots. And then when I was 9, I moved back to Canada to live with my parents in Montreal. And for the next few years, I lived with my parents in Canada. And then there onwards, my upbringing has been between Canada and Pakistan and everywhere else in the world. But my initial years were spent in Pakistan and in Canada. And then later on, my journey started by going into college and studying art. I studied film and photography.
Oh my gosh, you have a good experience.
Creative writing. And that kind of started my journey from there onwards into what became of me.
MashaAllah. And then the guy who just studied filming, he goes to humanitarian work, or what happens?
So for me to study art was a very deliberate attempt to try and find myself and to question. And for some of your viewers who understand the Indo-Pakistani culture, as boys, we are either supposed to become doctors or engineers.
Engineers. For Arab, the same, yeah.
Yes, or something more prestigious as being a chartered accountant or
Fragmist.
Something of that set. So for me to come up with this idea that I want to be an artist, and
it was crazy at that time.
Exactly, and not just to become an artist, but to actually formally study art. It was very nerve-wracking for my parents, and it was very difficult for them to accept. But nevertheless, I was very determined in my journey, and I went to the Ontario College of Art and Design in Toronto. And later, when I got accepted in the college, I realized the kind of challenging and prestigious the art school was. In Canada, that's kind of the Harvard of art school. And I didn't really understand and know that before I entered it. So my journey into finding myself started from there, which led me to different experiences, questioning myself, questioning the existence of God, religion, ultimately Islam. But it was done in a very non-conventional manner, being in an art environment where you're surrounded by all kinds of thoughts and ideas and very controversial ideas as well. So for me, that was uniquely a strange experience to have discovered myself as a Muslim of Pakistani descent, living in North America. And this is many, many years ago, prior to what we know as mainstream now. So that's how my journey into finding myself, then Islam, then further ahead with humanitarian development work. So that was the start of my journey from that institute.
As far as I know, during 1911, you've been to US, yeah?
Yeah. So what happened is after I completed my education, And mind you, these were the days where not many Muslims were involved in mainstream media. So I was one of the very few people of my generation studying mainstream media, communication, art at that time frame. So I was very fortunate enough that I was sent on a humanitarian mission as a filmmaker by a nonprofit organization in the U.S. And I was doing my internship at that time in Canada, where they hired this company that I was with, and I got a chance to travel, South Asia, and I really got to see the kind of humanitarian work that was going on, especially in the areas of education. And that really inspired me. And that's what I said, that I want to use my communication art skills to really get into humanitarian work, which led me to being in the U.S. and starting my professional journey from there with a nonprofit organization there that primarily catered to different parts of the world. And when the events of 9/11 happened, I was living in the U.S. at that time. And coming from Canada, the environment of growing up in Canada was very different in terms of your identity, in terms of who you are, what you stood for. So I always identified myself as a Pakistani Canadian, and I never had any conflict in that. Other people identified themselves as African Canadians, European Canadians, Central Asian Canadians, and that's perfectly fine. And there's a whole narrative around that, what does it mean to be a Canadian? So just to be white and to be Canadian, it's actually politically incorrect to say that's only defined, being Canadian. So that's the kind of environment I grew up in and I was educated in. But going to the U.S., as maybe the place where I was, all of a sudden I had to prove in so many ways that I was American and what it means to be in America and which I don't have a problem with. But the pressure of trying to prove yourself, the famous phrase that was very much thrown around media at that time, that either you are with us or you're against us. I had a lot of issues around that. Obviously, working in the humanitarian sector, I have a love for humanity, mankind, life in general. So the loss of life is obviously very tragic, for me and for anybody else, I'm sure. But the kind of political pressure that was present in the U.S. at that time, especially being a Muslim, that was not something that I would.
Was it like it equals to being terrorist?
I mean, these words hadn't really caught up by then, as what is a terrorist, what is not a terrorist, or what does it mean to be a liberal Muslim or a fundamental Muslim. So these were fairly new terminologies that were invented after September 11th. But it was going in that direction, and I didn't feel myself in that environment. So I decided to move back to Canada with my family. And at that point, I had the opportunity to move to the Gulf, to move to Qatar. And back then, Qatar which still is a small place, but it was in the process of its development. Now, a lot of people know Qatar as being the host for FIFA and Qatar Airways and so many other things, which is excellent. But during my time, it was just kind of the beginning of all that. So I took kind of a leap of faith and moved to Qatar and accepted a position with the Red Crescent, the Qatar Red Crescent, which is part of the International Federation of Red Cross Societies based in Geneva. So I joined Qatar, I moved to Qatar, and I worked there for many years in the areas of humanitarian work, but really focusing on developing communication, marketing, advertising, online presence, which was fairly new. This is right kind of before the dot-com bubble, or it was in the midst of all that. So, websites and online, these were all new concepts. So I was very much fortunate to be at the forefront of that, to have worked within the Red Crescent in resource mobilization, fundraising, to really focus on the marketing element and communication and resource mobilization element.
It was
for the Red Crescent.
it was something new for Qatar, yeah, for the authorities.
Yeah, I mean, it was new for everybody in that sense that within the nonprofit sector to be very dynamic in that way. Till recently, it was a very kind of a standard operation of, doing things. But with the coming of, the online presence and the internet and everything, it was really taking a new fold, a new design. So to have led that, especially from a Muslim country, I feel very blessed to be at the forefront of that. So that's kind of how my journey into Qatar
started. And there happened an earthquake, as far as I know, it was in Pakistan, am I right?
Yes.
And it changed your life to another level, let's say.
Very much. So the first earthquake that I was part of was an earthquake that happened in Iran, in Bam, in 2004. I was assigned there as a communication delegate. I got to go to the field, we set up a field hospital there, but I was very much responsible for the communication part of things, in line with all the Red Crosses, Red Crescents. So that was my first experience to be in a real field operation. So I was part of that. Then right after that, the tsunami happened in Indonesia. So I was very much part of that as well. And then in 2005, 2006, the earthquake happened in South Asia, which was in Pakistan, in Kashmir, in different areas of South Asia. So I was sent there initially, again, as a communication delegate for a few weeks. But when I arrived there, I saw the massive destruction. And I was requested by the Federation of Red Cross, Red Crescent, that if Qatar would like to set up a field hospital in Kashmir. Now, when I approached Qatar for that, they said yes, but you would have to lead that operation. So from there onwards, I kind of switched from communication to project management to health delivery to education in so many ways, because a lot of schools were destroyed in that area. So at that point in Qatar, they had also established a new organization called Reach Out to Asia, which was part of Qatar Foundation. So they had just taken off. So I was also asked by the Red Crescent to support Reach Out to Asia, to rehabilitate, facilitate all the schools in that area. There were about, I think, 22 schools that were destroyed during that time. So I was involved in that operation for about 3 years. And it was a very life-changing experience for me, because it was a transition from media communication into really project development, and especially within the areas of health and education. So that whole period with the Red Crescent, and then later I ended up joining Reach Out to Asia as being one of their first employees, and to really have that organization starting from zero to reach a level where their focus was primary education in Asian countries. So I was very much involved in that.
So actually, we met with you thanks to the projects we had with Fakhoora, or education above all. Can you talk about the Fakhoora project, please?
Yeah.
In Qatar, because as I know, you are the founder, one of the founders of this project.
So what happened in 2010, if you recall, there was an attack on Gaza, which was referred to as Operation Cast Lead by Israel. And what was seen during that war, that categorically education institutes were targeted. Because when you look at the history of the Palestinian people, one of the strongest tools they have as a mode of resistance is education.
Yes.
And Gaza being under the blockade since 2007, education was under threat in so many ways. But during that war, what was really seen was a deliberate attack on educational institutes. So as being part of Qatar Foundation, an idea was proposed that we need to work with the youth of Gaza. Because when we saw in media communication, the Palestinian youth lack the ability to really communicate in an effective way to Western media. Yes, amongst the Arabs and the Muslims, we knew the situation of Palestine and Gaza, but back then there was a huge information gap between, what was really happening in Gaza at a human level. So we launched a program which was called Fakhoora, and it was chaired by the founder of Qatar Foundation, and I was brought on board to execute that project. So I was the executive director of Fakhoora. The key purpose for that project was that along with the higher education scholarship program, we need to prepare the youth whereby they are very aware and they're very civic-minded and they have very strong communication skills by the time they finish their education after a period of 4 years. So we offered a 4-year scholarship program, and the idea was that 100 students each year would get the scholarship to study inside of Gaza, and their education would be completely paid for. But along with that, there were a few very core components of the program. One was what we call as civic leadership, that how do you create global citizens within this community whereby they are really effective individuals by the time they finish university, not only for their country or their nation, but also for their communities, even at their household level. So a lot of investment was done on that. Also, we developed a very strong student services program whereby it created a safety net for young people. By the time they're completing their education, they have the support mechanism in place with career counseling, psychosocial support, job placement, mentoring programs. So it became a very unique program. And the way the program was done, that it was co-funded by Fakhoora and the Islamic Development Bank, and it was implemented by UNDP, United Nations Development Program, in Gaza, along with local partners on the ground in the field. So it became a very successful program, and it became a flagship project for education in Gaza. And then later, this project was also extended to helping Syrian refugees to Lebanon, Turkey, and Jordan. And it became very effective. That was done in partnership with a Dutch organization, and there was co-funding involved with that, as well as there was EU funding involved coming from our partner. And we developed a very unique funding mechanism that, we developed the program as a very clear-cut, a very clear-cut program strategy and how it's to be implemented and what are the key things in that program. So it was a complete implementation document, a development plan for 10 years. And United Nations Development Program actually implemented that to really meet our targets. And then that program, as I said, was replicated for the Syrian refugees in Lebanon, Turkey, and Jordan. But what was very unique about it is the people that we trained in Gaza, they helped to implement that program
in Syria,
in Lebanon, Turkey, and Jordan for the Syrian. So we felt that it was really amazing capacity building. When we talk about sustainability, capacity building, empowerment, that we empowered youth and our staff from Gaza to really spearhead this for a different group of people in 3 different countries. So that went on for a fairly long time, and that has been a very successful program as well in these 3 countries.
Mr. Bernie, I think really I met your team in Qatar, and I know your team in Gaza. I think they were, and they are very successful, by the way. And you had some schools, yes? You had one school in Gaza, as far as I know. I mean, it was a Fakhoora school, and it was destroyed. Am I right? For the last, this bombing, Israeli bombing, they were destroyed.
Yeah, so the name actually, Fakhoora, was the name of an UNRWA school that was the site of an attack in 2010. And at that site, many young people were injured and killed. So we took the name Fakhoora as a symbolic name in order to advocate for protection of education. So that's how the name Fakhoora and the story of that started. And then most of our focus in Gaza was actually higher education. But we did venture into primary education, working with UNICEF and building the first child-friendly school in Gaza. But unfortunately, with the current situation in Gaza, most of these projects have been either completely destroyed or they have been severely damaged.
Okay.
So yes.
Totally useless, let's say. So, Ustaz Farooq, what about, we talked about the Palestinians, then let's move to Syrian refugees. As far as I know, you were doing some humanitarian relief work with the Syrian refugees within the Turkish borders as far as I'm inside the Syria. What about this?
Yeah. So we were not working inside Syria, but we were primarily working in Lebanon, Turkey, and Jordan. And one of our flagship projects for Fakhoora was actually in Turkey.
Hosting communities, let's say.
Yes, yes. And it was a very unique program because, again, it replicated all the success from Fakhoora. And by that time, Fakhoora in Gaza, and by that time, it had been 10 years, and really understood that what the challenges of the program was, what were the success factors. And we worked closely with universities in Turkey to implement this program. And then with one of the local charities here as well, Fakhoora did dormitories for female Turkish students.
Syrians.
Sorry. And also it had space for Turkish students as well, because we wanted to offer support to both the host communities as well as the Syrian community. So to these two dorm facilities, and that was actually one of my last projects with Fakhoora prior to me moving on.
What was your idea?
It was presented actually by one of the Syrian female students. But what we tried to do as a unique approach in this, and by that time I was no longer part of Fakhoora, but the initial project was that it wouldn't just be a living facility, but it would have a lot of the other factors. So when the girls or the women, they come and stay, they're also involved in a lot of development programs and leadership development programs. So it's not just a facility where they come and sleep only, but it would be a working facility with support from local organizations and capacity building and kind of a full center that would empower women. That was the idea.
By the way, very few people knows, but thanks to you now, or those dormitories, I mean, the first dormitory, let's say, they're hosting students more than 2 years.
Good.
And actually we met with this project.
Yeah.
I mean, based on this project, I was a focal person and I was a project manager of this project from the side of Turkish side. And I'm thankful to Allah for this, for this, let's say, nice meeting with you. Alhamdulillah, of course. So we talked about the dormitories, we talked about Palestinian and Syrian refugees that you did. After all, you had you moved to Istanbul. Yeah, you thought that it's better to move to Istanbul, and it was COVID. Actually, you stuck at Istanbul, as far as I know. Can you talk about these places?
So after being in Qatar for over 18 years, which was a very fruitful experience for me, very enlightening. Yeah, a very enlightening experience. I learned a lot from Qatar. I gave a lot to Qatar, people of Qatar. I realized that there were certain things that I wanted to do that were my personal passion. And one of the things I really wanted to do was to give back to the Canadian community. Because I felt that, my parents had immigrated to Canada many, many years ago. And again, being immigrants, first kind of people who came to Canada, they became what they became. First and foremost, with help from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and there onwards, with support from the environment that Canada provided them. And I always had this thing in me where, as a Muslim Canadian, I really wanted to do something for mainstream Canadian society. So I went to Canada actually right before COVID, and I purchased a facility, actually.
What was that facility?
It was actually a church.
You purchased the church?
Yeah. So the church was actually on sale, and I went there. It's a very small town in eastern part of Canada. You had to change like 3 airplanes to even get there. And when I got there, I realized COVID had just hit and everything was closed. But nevertheless, they were very supportive, and they showed me the facility, which was a church, which was actually a Catholic church, over 100 years old, that was on sale. And I saw it and I just fell in love with it. And during the course of time, I ended up buying that church. The people in that community that lived there were only about 1,100 people living in that community. And most of them are elderly people.
And they are Christians.
And they are Christians, and that's what I understood. And they're very afraid that I would convert this church into a mosque, and either a mosque or a nightclub. And I made it very clear to them that that's not my purpose. I would like to do something for you as the local community. So by that time, I had come back to Turkey, and that's where kind of my journey started in Turkey. I wasn't able to go back to Qatar because of COVID, but that project was actually going to be developed as a community center for the elderly people of that area. And my idea was to bring together the elderly and children, because as we know in the West, a lot of the elderly, they suffer from loneliness.
There is a gap.
There's a gap. And I thought it would be a lovely way of helping them as well as helping the next generation to bring them together into a day facility where these elderly could come, and we would bring young kids as well, almost like a daycare program where the young people would learn so much wisdom and different things from the elderly. And for the elderly, it would be a lovely experience to see and spend time with these youth. So that project kind of developed into what it developed, but that's a separate story.
Okay.
But what happened was I was meant to go back to Canada and move back. So we decided to reroute and settle in Turkey, in Istanbul. I had been coming to Turkey for a very long time, because of the project we're doing, and I was madly in love with Turkey and Istanbul. And it was what I found very unique was me being hybrid from East and West. I realized that it was a place where I could be myself as an Asian, as a North American, and there would be a lot of acceptance. And I felt that this could be a starting place for my new foundation that I created, and also some of the consulting work that I wanted to do. So hence, my journey from Turkey started there.
So you had some entrepreneurial, let's say, or business attempts or challenges in Turkey and Istanbul, and then we had some challenges with Turks, as far as I know, because I was with you in that time. I was trying to help you, to support you, to be a translator at least, like you, because you don't speak Turkish. So can you talk about this, please?
Yeah. So as I said, if somebody was to ever ask me, what is your favorite city? I would say Istanbul.
Okay.
And it was for me almost a dream coming true. So I purchased property, with whatever savings I had or whatever, as I know I mentioned earlier.
In the middle of Istanbul, it's in the heart of this.
Heart of Istanbul, I actually secured a heritage building.
Yes.
I with my art background, I redesigned it.
It was a very nice interior,
So I ended up moving there. And I tried to establish my foundation. And what I really saw was I kind of saw a transition at that point, a similar kind of a transition that Qatar was going through. And I was very much part of that from a education development point of view. And I had wanted to bring those same skills and the ability and the experience to Turkey to be able to help Turkey with the right people, with the right environment, to really help it to also position itself as a humanitarian development hub for the European countries to see as a very progressive Muslim nation.
Yeah.
And that was my intention. Did I succeed in that? I learned a lot, but I'm not sure how much I succeeded. Because after spending 4 years in Turkey, in Istanbul, in different parts of Istanbul, then moving from Istanbul to other parts to establish my foundation, which is called the Infinite Foundation, and my consulting company, which is called the Infinite Group, I felt I wasn't as successful as I wanted to be, and what I wanted to contribute to Turkey. Unfortunately, it didn't materialize the way I wanted it to materialize, hence which ultimately led me to transitioning from Turkey to Central Asia and to Europe.
So you talk about Infinite. You told Infinite. This is a foundation that you founded, as far as I know, in Europe. And what's that for?
So, having worked in Western Europe for so many years, I felt I had a very strong network in Western Europe, and I was very eager to work with second, third generation Muslims, youth, that were living in Europe, especially in the Netherlands, in France, in Germany, with this identity of what does it mean to be a European Muslim. You definitely, being second, third generation, yes, you have your roots, but, what does that mean to be a positive contributor to European society as a European Muslim with either Middle Eastern or Asian or even African backgrounds? So that was the purpose of establishing the foundation in the Netherlands. So my foundation is a Dutch foundation based in the Netherlands, and there has many programs that cater to youth development, not only in Europe, but in other places such as education in Afghanistan. Now we are very much involved in the Gaza crisis. But our core purpose has always been is youth development. Is how do you transition, or how do you work with young people to become global citizens of tomorrow? And there are different programs related to education that the organization caters to. So that was kind of the humanitarian aspect. But then I also have another part, which is called the Infinite Group. So the Infinite Group actually manages the Infinite Foundation as a nonprofit organization, whereas the Infinite Group is a social enterprise, which basically is that all the money it earns, the profit, it's a for-profit entity, but the profit that is earned actually goes back into the mission of the social enterprise in order to enhance its work and be able to do different things. So the things that I have learned with the team that I work with has to do a lot with organizational development. It has to do with nature-based learning. It has to do with looking at or providing care to youth that are at risk or with special needs. So there are different programs that the Infinite Group and the Infinite Foundation are catering to. So we currently have a branch. Our head office is based in the Netherlands, but we have operations in Afghanistan, in Gaza currently. The consulting work that I do with the Infinite Group, it also has an office in Turkey as well as an office in the Netherlands. So basically, the sum up of the foundation and the group has been all the things that I always aspired to do, but due to a job situation, due to the different restraints that I had working within the nonprofit development sector, that I could spearhead these by myself. And so this is where the Infinite Foundation and the Infinite Group comes in.
I have, let's say, a bit tricky question. You've been traveling all over the world. You've seen lots of people in the world. Can you tell, please, what's so that you love in Arabs and you don't love? And the same for the Turks, and the same for example, Pakistanians or other. And you are now living in Kazakhstan, for example, for Kazakh people, if it's okay for you.
So I've been very fortunate to have worked with people from international across the world. I feel very blessed. You could say I'm a global citizen.
Are you?
I think I am. I have a home, but I don't also have a home. So which is at times a good thing, but as you get older, you really crave to have a home. And so at this phase in my life, I'm craving a home, a place where I can set root, which brought me to Turkey, which I had hoped to explore to Canada as well. I mean, Canada is an option. I extremely love Canada. The people of Canada, I think some of the nicest people in the world are Canadian people, from whatever ethnic background they're from. So Canada has that, where you could, or at least during my days when I was growing up, things have slightly changed now, but during times of my parents and my growing up, obviously racism was there, but this question of identity is very important. You have to know where you belong. And Canada was one of those unique places where, like myself, so many people were able to establish themselves as Canadians and not be in conflict about that. So you determine your own identity. And I think that's a very unique place. Even Europe doesn't have that. And we know the kind of racism and Islamophobia and all those things that exist. Canada was an exception to that many, many years ago. Hence, that environment, the people, that was something that I naturally gravitated towards, and which helped me to become the kind of person that I became, with a certain kind of an identity and a mission in my life. Pakistan is another place which I do consider myself as Pakistani, but it has its challenges. I think similar to Canada, Pakistanis are also very hospitable, very warm, and perhaps one of the nicest people in the world. As Pakistanis, unfortunately, due to political circumstances, institutional problems, the country has not been able to be where it is at. But if you talk generally of people, general people, I also find them extremely hospitable, friendly, polite. Most of my life, actually, I've spent with the Arabs. And I have this running joke that actually I was supposed to be an Arab, but something happened that I ended up being born in Pakistan because of my affiliation with the Arab people, and especially with Palestine. Over the last almost 18 to 20 years now, I've been involved in the Palestinian cause. So I find Arabs also to be very hospitable, very giving, very, in so many ways, simple too, in a lot of good ways. And there's challenges with every nation, like with Pakistan, and I had my share of challenges living in the Arab world, as well. Turkey as well. I think there's some great people here. I think there's a lot going on here, and but my personal experience, and I say this as my personal experience, by no means I mean to generalize it, is it's been a challenge for me to adjust as a foreigner, as a Western foreigner, or you want to call me as an Asian foreigner, or whoever I am. The country has so much going for itself in terms of its development, in terms of its location, in terms of its climate. I think people living here are very much introvert, which is a very good thing. But I think if you want to be able to break out and really be able to position yourself as a global entity, which historically Turkey and Ottomans were, then you need a lot more exposure, and not just exposure at a face value, not something artificial, but really be able to extend yourself, to learning more, understanding more, and be receptive, And I say this to people, my Turkish friends, I said, please don't get offended with me, but I have literally put my money where my mouth was or is, meaning that I came to settle here. I invested my money here. I did a lot of things, and I learned a lot in that process. But where I wanted to be in Turkey as a real contributor to the development of Turkey, I felt that was very difficult because perhaps of some of the systems that are in place, some of the global challenges, political challenges, perhaps Turkey faces. But I'm, as being a professional in development and humanitarian work, I'm more concerned about the people, I'm not a place to comment on politics and the bigger spectrum of things, but from an educational point of view, I think one of the things Turkey can really benefit from is reviving or relooking or revamping the education system, because it looks at, it takes a generation to be able to transform.
Yes.
And I think Turkey is in a good place right now where I think a lot of investment needs to be made into education. And when we talk about education, I'm not talking about a Western or an Eastern form of education. I think Turkey has its history. And I think to look at the best practice, the good of what Turkey has, and then to look at the best practice of the world, and to be able to bring that and infuse that together, whereby you retain your identity, but nevertheless, you're also able to transform and really build on all the goodness that is out there. I think that would be very useful for Turkey and for the next generations to come.
Thank you so much. Looking back at all these diverse experience and expertise that you have, what lessons you have learned from this humanitarian work about this crisis or about these cultures?
I think what's important in my case is, as you mentioned earlier, that I spent a lot of time in humanitarian development work, and as we look at the situation of the world today, the way I look at humanitarian work, it's very important and it's necessary. But one of the point of frustrations that we have is we keep doing the same thing and we keep going backwards in terms of the world is facing a lot of challenges and it's not where it should be. So meaning that we keep repeating we're just providing humanitarian assistance for the longest time. So what is, humanitarian assistance is just one tool. It's really bandaging the problem. What really needs to happen is we need to look at things and address things from a political point of view, so we can look at a long-term solution, to really invest in the next generation of youth. Because one of the things is, yes, you can educate them, you can do whatever, but if you cannot promise them a brighter future, a better tomorrow, you will have a generation that will be struggling a lot. And that is your future, not just of a country, but the future of the world. And I think this is what we have to realize, that, we have to provide a better tomorrow to the world, not just only from a humanitarian point of view, but from a development point of view, and to be providing an environment where young people have the ability to explore their talent, to explore their God-given gifts. Every human being is unique. Every human being is different. I mean, you look at our fingerprints. Every human being, that's the beauty of creation, is unique. No human being has the same fingerprints. And I strongly believe that also no human being has the same characteristic. They might be similar. So every human being is unique.
Specific.
Yes. So being somebody in the area of education and human development, I feel our role as people involved in this work is to work with young people in providing them that opportunity where they can explore and exploit their God-given talents, which enables them to become better human beings for themselves, for their families, for their neighborhood, for their nation, and for the world. I think that's the real challenge, and that's what's going to determine success.
Nevertheless, you're going to live in Kazakhstan, but you work still internationally.
Yeah,
like Infinite. What are your future aspirations and plans?
Yeah. So for now, we've set home in Kazakhstan. My children are obviously mixed, and I want them to know more about Kazakh culture. So that's important for us. But for me, my mission remains that wherever I am, whether it's Kazakhstan, whether it's Turkey, whether it's the Middle East, whether it's Canada, is really to contribute to the development of the next generation, to work with youth. And really, when I say work with them, I think the first journey or the first step to the journey is when a young person discovers his or her talents and its uniqueness. So I feel if you can put the seed of that in somebody as youth, that enables or encourages them to think outside the box, be more empathetic, understand the situation, I think you've started a chain process towards positive development and positive change towards themselves in the world. And I feel that to be my mission in life.
I think you will succeed, inshallah. And make me dua to be millionaire and to be helpful for you on these issues, inshallah, and this humanitarian work. Hope to, of course, to cooperate with you in future, definitely. Thank you so much for coming. I think it was very nice conversation with you. People don't like listening too much or watching too much. They need and some people say 40 and 50 minutes are very, nice, perfect period time for podcasts. So the only thing I ask our subscribers just to like us and to comment. And it was my first, podcast in English, and please don't judge me too severely. Thanks a lot for coming again, and I wish you good luck. I hope, inshallah, you'll succeed, definitely.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.